Have you ever been sitting at home on a Saturday watching football and thought to yourself how this sport became so great in our culture? Well, American football has come a long way from just a game that combined the sports of soccer and rugby. My name is Terrell DeDeaux, and I'm going to give you a brief history of college football. Football was originally brought to the United States by early settlers from Britain in the form of rugby. The game began to morph into our modern football in the early 1800s at Eastern universities such as Princeton, Harvard, Dartmouth, and Yale. As you can probably imagine, football at this time was still a bloody, gruesome game with nearly no rules. The first manufactured inflatable balls were introduced in 1855. These balls were more regular in shape, making the game much easier to play. In 1869, Rutgers faced Princeton, marking the first intercollegiate football game. In the year 1873, representatives from several schools met to form the first set of intercollegiate football rules. The game created at these meetings was not much like the game we know now. It was more like soccer, I'd say. Um, Harvard refused to attend these meetings because they played their own set of rules in which the player can now run the ball instead of just kicking it. This made it difficult for Harvard to find opponents. So in 1876, they met with these schools to form the first intercollegiate football association. Walter Camp, uh, who went to Yale in the late 1870s, impacted the sport forever by establishing foundations for football as we now know it, and eventually earned his title as the father of American football. Camp's first rule change occurred in 1880, reducing the number of players from 15 to 11. This shifted the strategy of the game from a strength-based to more of a speed-based play. Camp also established the line of scrimmage and the snap from center to quarterback. This was intended to increase scoring, but was exploited by teams by slowing gameplay and maintaining control of the ball for nearly the entire game. Walter Camp countered this weakness by establishing downs. With this rule, the ball must advance a minimum of 5 yards in 3 downs. Camp even determined the size of the field, which we still use today, which is 120 by 53 and a third yards. And by this time, it's the early 1900s, and we have a game that closely resembles our modern football, but was still very violent. Um, in 1905, 19 fatalities were reported, forcing President Teddy Roosevelt to threaten to shut down the game if drastic changes were not made. The president was actually a fan of the sport, but pushed to modernize the game even more and improve player safety. On December 28th of that year, 62 schools met to propose rule changes. These schools actually formed what we now know as the NCAA. The most significant change was the introduction of the forward pass. This was thought to open up the game and ultimately reduce injury. From this time until just before 1930, football became the sport we now know today. In 1910, a rule was formed that required 7 offensive players to be on the line of scrimmage in order to snap the ball. And the first roughing the passer rule was incorporated in 1914, which obviously was intended to protect the quarterback. The scoring system was entirely revised during this time. In 1909, the field goal was lowered to 3 points instead of 5, And in 1912, the touchdown was raised to 6 points rather than 4. During this evolution of college football, the first professional leagues were created. In 1902, the National Football League was established, although the NFL we know today was not established until 1919. Today, there are over 115 college football programs. The University of Pennsylvania holds the record for the most games played at 1,336, and Michigan holds the record for the most wins at 908. Um, that is just a brief history and of the evolution of college football as we know it today.